pigs gone wild. Researchers found that Texas has the worst feral hog problem in the entire country.
Millions of wild hogs are currently invading the American landscape and destroying native ecosystems 1 acre at a time. These animals are smart, fast, and incredibly dangerous to livestock.
They're very destructive. If I looked at it on average, I could lose up to 10% of my grain crops in a growing season from the wild hogs.
However, a strange pattern of population collapse has been spotted in Georgia and Oklahoma recently. Trail cameras captured a scene that nobody expected to happen, and it changed the entire strategy for wildlife experts. There are still many rumors in the air, but what many can confirm is that the hogs are no longer at the top of the food chain in these specific areas. Vanishing sounders in Lone Star State. The feral hog crisis in America has reached a point where it feels like a scene from a horror movie. These animals are not your typical farm pigs. They are massive, hairy, and have tusks that can rip through almost anything. Right now, there are an estimated 6 million feral hogs roaming across at least 35 states. Texas is basically ground zero for this invasion. For a long time, the hogs had no natural predators, which allowed them to take over entire counties. They destroy crops, ruin soil, and spread diseases to livestock and even humans. The damage they do is putting it lightly when you realize it totals $2.5 billion every single year. Farmers are losing their livelihoods because a group of hogs can destroy a field of corn or cotton in just one night. But here is the deal.
In Texas, they're going hog wild over wild hogs. The feral animals are causing hundreds of millions of dollars of damage to crops across the state.
Recently, something very strange started happening in places like Blanco County. Wildlife officials and ranchers noticed that entire sounders, which is what you call a group of hogs, were just gone. Usually these animals are everywhere. You see them on trail cameras. You see their tracks and you hear them at night. But in certain areas, the activity just stopped. It was as if they had been erased from the map. At first, people thought maybe a new disease was moving through the population. Others thought that hunters were being much more successful than usual, but nobody had reported those kinds of numbers. The mystery started to grow when trail cameras showed empty woods where hundreds of hogs used to roam. One of the most overlooked aspects of this story is how smart these hogs actually are. They are not just mindless animals. They learn. If you try to trap them and one escapes, that hog will never go near a trap again. They even teach their young to avoid humans and loud noises. This intelligence is why traditional methods like corral traps and hunting with dogs have not been enough to stop them. They reproduce so fast that you have to take out 70% of the population every year just to keep the numbers level. Since we have not been able to do that, the population has been exploding. But then the vanishing act started. Wildlife officials were confused because they were seeing these massive population collapses without any clear explanation. They set up more cameras and started tracking the remaining hogs more closely. They even used what they call Judas pigs. This is when they catch a hog, put a tracking collar on it, and release it so it leads them back to the rest of the group. But even with the collars, they were finding that the groups were getting smaller and smaller. It was like something was picking them off one by one, but in a way that did not leave a lot of evidence behind. So, here is the catch. The government had spent millions of dollars on new ways to eliminate these hogs. They were looking at everything from specialized poisons to aerial removal using helicopters. They were even testing a type of birth control for the hogs to try and slow down the population growth, but when the reports of the disappearing sounders came in, they had to pause. They needed to know if nature was doing the work for them before they spent any more taxpayer money on these expensive programs. The tension was high because if something was taking out the hogs, everyone wanted to know if it was dangerous to humans or other animals too. The investigation took a serious turn when researchers found evidence that suggested a predator was involved, but it was not the kind of predator they expected. And they found spots in the brush where it looked like a struggle had happened, but there were no shell casings or signs of human activity. The tracks they found near the sites were familiar, but the behavior was totally different from what they had seen in the past. This led to a massive effort to gather more data and figure out the truth behind these silent removals. The search for answers led the team to a remote area where the hog activity had completely bottomed out. Predator adaptation changing wild dynamics. The truth finally started to come out when trail camera footage from 2014 was finally analyzed with a fresh set of eyes. For a long time, everyone thought coyotes were just scavengers. We all grew up hearing that they mostly ate rabbits, rodents, and the occasional leftover carcass. Nobody really thought a coyote was brave enough or strong enough to take on a feral hog. Hogs are mean, and a mother hog will defend her piglets with incredible violence. But get this, the footage showed something that looked like it belonged in a nature documentary from the African savanna, not the Texas brush. Basically, the coyotes had learned how to hunt in highly coordinated groups to target the hogs. This was not a random act of a hungry animal, it was a tactical shift. The cameras captured coyotes working together to distract the mother hog while other members of the pack slipped in to take the piglets. They were focusing on the juvenile hogs because they were easier to handle and provided a lot of food. This is a key detail because it shows that the coyotes recognized a massive food source that they had been ignoring for years. Now, once one pack learned how to do it, the behavior started to spread. What most people do not realize is that coyotes are incredibly adaptable. When their usual food sources like rabbits or deer get scarce, they look for something else. Because the feral hog population was so huge, there was basically an all-you-can-eat buffet in the woods. But the crazy part is how they were taking them down. They were not just biting and hoping for the best. They were using teamwork to isolate the smaller hogs and move them away from the protection of the sounder. Once the piglet was alone, the coyotes would finish the job quickly and efficiently. This discovery was a total game changer for the wildlife officials. They started checking coyote scat and the stomach contents of coyotes that had passed away. And the DNA testing confirmed exactly what the footage showed. These coyotes were eating a lot of feral hog. In some areas, hog meat made up a huge portion of their diet. It turns out that the coyotes were acting as a natural biological check on the invasive species. They were taking out the next generation of hogs before they could even grow up and reproduce. This explains why the sounder numbers were collapsing in certain counties. Many are not seeing the truth here because they still view coyotes as a nuisance. Farmers usually dislike coyotes because they worry about their sheep or calves. But in this case, the coyotes were actually doing the farmers a huge favor. They were doing for free what the government was spending millions of dollars trying to achieve. The coordination was so impressive that it actually scared some of the researchers. Seeing a pack of coyotes execute a perfect ambush on a group of hogs is enough to make anyone feel a bit uneasy. It shows that the wild is always watching and always changing. But there was more to the story than just hunting. Some of the footage showed coyotes taking down larger juveniles that were much bigger than the coyotes themselves. They were using their numbers to wear the hog out, biting at its legs and neck until it could no longer fight back. This kind of pack hunting is usually associated with wolves, but the coyotes were proving that they could be just as effective. This realization made officials rethink their entire approach to predator control. If they took out the coyotes, they would basically be helping the feral hogs survive. The mystery seemed solved, but the sudden decision to abort the missions suggested there was even more to find. Official response to natural solutions. Once the officials saw the evidence of the coyote adaptation, they did something nobody expected. They started to abort their large-scale removal missions in those specific areas. It might seem strange to stop a project that is supposed to help, but there was a very logical reason for it. See, human intervention can sometimes mess up the natural progress of an ecosystem. If the government went in with helicopters and guns, they would likely scatter the coyote packs or change their behavior. They realized that the coyotes were actually more effective at long-term control than humans were. So here is the deal. The budgets for these taxpayer-funded culls are massive. We are talking about millions of dollars spent on fuel, equipment, and specialized staff. When officials saw that the coyotes were taking out the juvenile hogs at such a high rate, they decided to step back and let the ecological balance play out. They wanted to see if the coyote population could actually keep the hog numbers down permanently. This led to an operational pause that felt like a secret to many people living in those areas. They were used to seeing the government trucks and hearing the helicopters, and suddenly it all went quiet. The crazy part is that this decision was not just about the coyotes. Officials were also worried about the environmental costs of other methods. Some of the poisons being tested for hogs could accidentally take out other wildlife or even pets if they were not used perfectly. By letting the coyotes handle the problem, there was zero risk of chemical contamination in the soil or water. It was a hands-down win for the environment, even if it meant admitting that nature was better at the job than we were. But here is the catch. Not everyone was happy about this. Some ranchers still wanted the coyotes gone because they did not trust them near their livestock. This created a lot of tension between the local people and the wildlife managers. People started asking why the missions were being aborted and if there was something the government was not telling them. This is where the rumors really started to fly. When the government stops doing something they have been doing for years without a very loud and clear explanation, people fill in the blanks with their own theories. Basically, the officials had to balance the needs of the ranchers with the reality of the science. They started focusing more on research and less on active removal. They wanted to track the long-term impact of this predator shift. They started looking at things like the health of the soil and the return of native plants in areas where the hog population had dropped. One of the most overlooked aspects of this is that when hogs are removed, the whole forest starts to heal. The ground is not torn up as much, and ground-nesting birds have a better chance of survival. Even though the coyote discovery was the main reason for the shift, officials kept an eye on other factors too. They continued to monitor for things like African swine fever, which is a massive threat to the pork industry. They did not want to get so distracted by the coyotes that they missed a deadly disease, but for the most part, the message was clear. They were stepping back to let the wild finish what it started. It was a tactical retreat that favored biology over technology. As the government stepped away, the vacuum of information led to some very wild and dark ideas online. Whenever there is a mystery and a sudden change in government plans, conspiracy theories are bound to pop up. A lot of people were confused about why the hog removal stopped so abruptly. On hunting forums and social media, the discussions turned into a total frenzy. Some ranchers and locals started speculating that the coyotes were not just regular animals. There were claims that the government had actually released bioweapons or lab-created pathogens to take out the hogs. And the coyotes were just a cover story. The idea was that the discovery of the coyotes was a convenient way to hide a failed experiment that might have gone wrong. And get this, some people went even further. They claimed that the coyotes had been genetically tampered with to make them more aggressive toward hogs. They pointed to how quickly the behavior changed and said it did not feel natural. There were even rumors that the footage hidden from the public showed larger, unknown predators that looked like mountain lions or even weird hybrids. Everyone was obsessed with the idea that something else was out there. They thought the site evacuations happened because the researchers found something that they could not explain to the general public without causing a panic. Is it possible that we are witnessing the birth of a new apex predator that might eventually turn its sights on more than just feral hogs? What do you think about the government's decision to suddenly stop their intervention? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more mysteries.